Well, thanks very much. Thanks for keeping and staying still here. If you would have known the talk before, we would have presented a song, but it's too short now, sadly. So even AI cannot make that happen in such a short notice. So what we are going to speak about is the question of trust. And of course, coming from Bundesdruckerei, trust is basically our DNA, and we've been dealing with that for like 250 years. Not always with AI in the past, but now we are doing a lot. And what we are presenting is also joint work with the team of Gesche from the various organizations you heard just now.
Yeah, mostly from DFKI. Yeah.
Yes, great. So let's delve right into it. So our belief, of course, is that trust is fundamental, and probably that's not something that anyone is going to argue with. So, I mean, as a summary of the day today, I would probably say, yes, certainly AI is all over the place, and it's much more than having a tool set or having the right hammer to put the nail into something. It's really changing what we are doing. It's changing our society. It's changing our life. And so we really believe that trust is going to be a key enabler for the usage and the widespread production of AI in all situations of life. So I guess everyone is already using AI a lot in the private segment. I know at least that my sons do it very much when they do their homework and other stuff. And in a way, it's great because they get to know this technology in a very easy way. Whereas at work, in many cases, we don't have the right usage because of regulative questions, of liability questions, of security questions, and other things. So I think in the end, of course, we need some ways of dealing with that. And also then the question is, if it's really a life-changing technology, then of course we probably need a more intense relation with this technology. And I loved the term that we just heard in the talk, that the technology needs to be relatable. And this is actually one of the key messages that we have. So even if it was planned, this was a perfect planning of the agenda. But of course, before that, there's regulation. And we already heard a lot about regulation. And of course, we need some type of regulation. I think there's an agreement here. Not in the sense that it's going to be prohibiting a lot of stuff, but in the sense that it's really enabling stuff. And I think we can all agree that setting the right framework here for AI is probably a big enabler, and we do hope, of course, that as a joint effort of the whole community, of everyone here, we can also make Europe a success factor in this case with AI regulation and everything. So I think it's important to have this, but in the end, it's just going to be a sticker on the product. So we need it, but there's more. And here we come to the question of being in a relation, so to speak, to the AI, not a proper relation, or well, we've seen these cases as well, quite dangerous in some cases, but it's clear we need some type of relatable technology. And where does it come from? And from the projects that we did, and also from the project that we did with Gesche's team, we saw that one of the core elements really is not what the system actually can do, or what it can prove to do, or what the certification says that it does. It's really the question of interaction. So we do believe that a very strong focus in the context of generating trust comes from this relation elements. And it's basically the same thing that I guess you know from your private situation as well. I mean, with AI, we always have the situation that somehow the people are asking their toaster now to write some code or to fry an egg. That's not going to work. And it's the same thing if you go to Alexanderplatz. Probably you ask someone where some shop or some restaurant is, and maybe he will tell you something, and then you will walk in the direction, but most likely you will not ask him to make your tax declaration. So it's clear that some type of relation is going to play a role, and if someone did your tax declaration successful for many times, you will going to ask him again, and if the toaster is toasting your bread successfully, you will put the bread in again. So it's clear that this is gonna help and gonna be essential. With that, I would like to hand over to Gesche to present some of the results.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So it's about building trust, and we ask ourselves in the collaboration with the Bundesdruckerei and the DFKI, how do we do this? You know, everybody's talking about trust, but how do we really do it? On the first hand side, about the methodology, so how do we really create and build trust? And on the other hand side, what are the building blocks? Are there building blocks to create trust? And this is what we came up with. So we think and we propose that this human-in-the-loop approach is very, very important. In the talk beforehand, we heard much about the user and the usage. So, you know, people have to try out AI. But here we talk about how we developed AI systems and large language models especially. And what does this mean, the human-in-the-loop approach? So it's not just about kind of existing systems that might be a bit kind of calibrated, but it's really thinking the whole process of building the interaction with large language models and with Gen AI as such as a design-driven discovery process. So it's really putting the human with all his or her different expertises, values, competencies, skills in the center of the development process. And this is what we did in our collaboration, and this is how we identify trust-building mechanisms through this kind of iterative user interaction and not just testing. So if you really put the user into the center, you can really have a kind of, you know, deal-breaking situation where Gen AI systems might be much more successful than before. So through this approach, we develop design elements, interaction patterns, and contextual clues that are key for this kind of perception also of trust. So it's very much about the perception of trust, the building of trustworthy interactions, and this kind of trust is just done and kind of emerges from the interaction of the user with the system. So if you think about your own kind of experiences interacting with AI systems, think of your maybe daily expertise with perplexity. You have these little sources that are marked there with these little numbers. And if you click on these sources, you see the actual source of the information. This is one key element of building trust, because then you can really fight this big issue of hallucination and of hallucinating systems, and then you can really prove, you know, where this information is derived from. So what we developed is a kind of participatory design process and approach that is kind of linked into usability testing, and it's fighting over-trust into a system so that you kind of blindly use the system and say, well, it will work out anyhow, or also the under-trust in systems, that you are kind of always shying away from using it, and that was something that was also discussed in the talk beforehand, so that people just don't want to use it because they say, oh, it's hallucinating anyway. So we have to balance between over-trust and under-trust. So what we want to develop is these kind of technically robust and aligned systems that are aligned with human values, and this is what we call trust calibration. So what we did is thinking about the context. Where is an LLM used and how is this related to trust? So we have to adapt trust to the situational needs. So how we investigated the context. So if trust in LLMs is highly context depending, then you can think about it's, for example, it's influenced by user familiarity with a large language model. So did you ever interact with a large language model? The nature of the task, and the user's intent, motivation, and weaknesses. So that's for concepts like topic dependency and AI literacy are key trust dimensions. That means, so if the user, so you yourself, are familiar with the topic that you're interacting with the LLM, then you are much more confident in investigating whether the results are kind of, you know, reliable, whether they are trustworthy, or how literate you are in the whole interaction with AI as such. So this has a major influence in building trust. And therefore, the LLM should adapt by modulating language complexity, offering tailored explanations, and surfacing context-relevant risks due to your input and your level of proficiency, your level of AI literacy. So this means indicating that the LLM just does not know the answer or with a low probability instead of hallucinating answers. I think it would help us a lot if we could just see, you know, I suggest you with this result, but the probability is just 20%. Then, you know, we can interact with this and we can trust the system. So what we did is developed out of these kind of findings that we had in our collaboration with the Bundesdruckerei, we developed this framework how to calibrate trust. And you see here in this model, you see on the bottom, you see that trust is based on data. We heard a lot about, through today's discussions, about data. we see that these kind of building blocks, that the foundation of data has to be, in our kind of ideal model, it has to be open access, and it has to, of course, comply to privacy regulations, what Kim just mentioned. At the core, you have kind of 3 building blocks. That is the user, the interface, and the model as such. And these 3 components are the basis of this kind of creating trustful interaction with AI. For example, interfaces can promote explainable AI by making results transparent and interpretable for the user, so no black boxes anymore. And at the top, you see the ethics. So this is based on fairness, on open access, and on language. Well, this means, for example, that no single organization should have complete control over the large language model. So this was, in an ideal world, this would mean that LLMs have unrestricted access for users. So that is kind of not, so that's kind of opening up the accessibility and transparency, and it should be open access to the general public without usage barriers. So opening up the databases, but also opening up for the ethical kind of control that we need to have. So developers, in turn, means that they should be held accountable for the developments, should act with integrity and responsibility. So this would be the ethics side of the house. And we have in this model, you see how this all comes together. So I was talking about the user, this kind of level of AI literacy, the experiences, whether you are familiar with a topic, how this is reflected in the interface, how the interface should create transparency, should guide the interaction, and how this is reflected also in the model with the performance, with the explainability, and also with the language that is used. So it's a kind of interactive system that you can calibrate the level of trust depending on all these kind of components based on data, and then leading to an ethical, compliant system. What we developed together with Bundesdruckerei is a whole model. This framework has 5 trust areas that you see here, and 15 trust dimensions that are interdependent on each other, so that they are depending on each other. And we see that this would be a framework how to use and develop new LLM systems that are trustworthy. We are currently working on the publication on that one, so follow us on DFKI and Bundesdruckerei if you want to dig deeper into this one. So that was a bit on excursus of how we were working together.
Thanks very much. Let me just briefly go back to this, because thanks, Gesche. And I think what I found especially fascinating about this, you always start with such a project, and in the beginning you think it's mainly about software and technology and all this type of stuff. And of course, that's a big part. But in the end, as from my point, you can see, of course, data is always a big thing, as we just heard in the talk before. AI and data, they go together, and the quality and the trust is coming from both of these things. But in the end, you see a lot of non-technical stuff. Yeah, I mean, for example, the user, who is typically forgotten in many of these things. And I think it's also important to see that I think in the end, trust and ethics is strongly interrelated. So in the end, I think all discussions that we have about AI, they are also about values in the end. Yeah? So the question, how to evaluate this ethics, how to evaluate quality of data, a probable bias of data, and other things, it's always related to some values that are underlying this. And I think that's really probably also, given the current geopolitical and other situation, a big discussion that we cannot lead here, but it's important to say, in the end, we see that trust is a multidimensional thing that really comes from technical and other things. And so basically, these are the takeaways that we wanted to give you on your way. So what we found is, of course, that trust is really the foundation for a usage that digs deep into the organization and also inside your personal experience with that. And of course, as a basis, we do need regulations. And of course, these are basically technical ones. Yeah? I mean, we know that within the AIDAQ, there's still a lot of stuff that needs to be cleared up, and a lot of the stuff that we discussed is probably a good input for that. But we also think that it can only be a start. Yeah? It can be a starting point, so you need this sticker on the product that says, yes, it is AIDAQ compliant, but in the end, we are totally convinced that this is not going to be the end of the story. But really, we think that trust in AI requires much more than that. It requires bringing the stakeholders together to really relate to the system, and relating to the system, that probably means the user experience, also the feedback experience of the system, and also in the end, your experience with it will generate the additional layer of trust, and we do think that this additional layer of trust is probably the distinctive experience. And I do think that this whole discussion about regulation and also trust and security, in many ways, it's often seen as a non-opportunistic way of dealing with these things. But I really think it's an enabling discussion. Yeah? It's not about prohibiting things, but it's about enabling things in a trustworthy way. And so I do hope that together we can bring AI forward in the terms of trustworthiness, of openness, and of course of security, and probably make this to a unique selling point for Europe as a region, as a trust region for AI. And if our talk today could help to move this along a little bit, then we've already achieved what we wanted to do without singing. So next time we will come with a song, promise. That's it.
Yeah,
thanks very much, Gesche. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Thanks for your time. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
We can